The salt-worn lighthouse of Port Haven stood like a lonely sentinel against the darkening sky. Here, where the waves crashed endlessly against weather-beaten rocks, Sanaa spent her 17th year, as she had spent all others, watching her father, Zaire, tend to the ancient beacon that had guided ships safely to harbor for over a century. But tonight was different. Tonight, the air held a heaviness that went beyond the gathering storm clouds. Sanaa traced her fingers along the worn brass railing of the spiral staircase, counting the steps as she had done since childhood. 108 steps to the top, each one bearing the footprints of 3 generations of lighthouse keepers. Her grandfather, Kiyoshi's words echoed in her mind.
The sea gives, and the sea takes.
Lately, the sea had done nothing but take. First, her mother to distant shores, and now, it seemed determined to take her father's spirit as well. For weeks, Sanaa had noticed the change in Zaire. His shoulders slumped a little more each day. His eyes constantly drawn to the horizon as if searching for an escape. The lighthouse's ancient mechanisms had begun to fail more frequently, requiring increasingly complex repairs that their meager keeper's salary could barely cover. Last month, when the main beam flickered during a crucial moment, 3 fishing boats nearly ran aground on the treacherous rocks. The incident had sparked an investigation, and the maritime authorities' verdict had arrived that morning, in a crisp white envelope. The memory of that near disaster still haunted Sanaa. She remembered standing in this very tower, watching helplessly as the fishing boats struggled against the current. Their lights barely visible through the fog. The sailors' desperate radio calls still echoed in her nightmares. If it hadn't been for her grandfather, Kiyoshi's quick thinking, rushing to the shore with the ancient emergency lamp that had been gathering dust in the cellar for decades, those boats might have become part of Port Haven's tragic history. That night changed everything. The following weeks brought a parade of inspectors, each carrying clipboards and wearing expressions that grew increasingly grave as they examined the lighthouse's aging equipment. They spoke in whispers, but their words carried up the spiral staircase like ghost voices. Obsolete, liability, modernization, critical. Each word a hammer blow to her father's pride. As Sanaa reached the topmost chamber, she found her father engaged in his nightly ritual of cleaning the massive lens. But tonight, his movements lacked their usual reverence. The letter lay unopened on the logbook, its official seal glinting accusingly in the beam's rotating light. Next to it sat a stack of maintenance logs, records of every repair, every malfunction, every close call from the past year. The pages had grown thicker with each passing month.
The sea is restless tonight,
Sanaa said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since breakfast. Through the windows, she could see dark clouds massing on the horizon, their edges tinged with an ominous green that old sailors claimed foretold the worst storms. Zaire's hands stilled on the lens.
Like our lives,
He replied, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken decisions.
you saw the letter?
He asked, fighting back his voice from breaking and giving away the turmoil brewing inside him. Sanaa nodded, though her father wasn't looking at her.
Grandfather says you don't have to open it. We already know what it says.
A bitter laugh escaped Zaire's lips.
Ha,
Your
grandfather. He sees too much and says too little.
He said. He finally turned to face his daughter, his features carved in shadows as the beam swept past.
But even he can't stop time. The world is changing, Sanaa. Automated lighthouses, GPS systems, satellite navigation, they don't need keepers anymore. They don't need this.
The rest of his words fading into the distance. He gestured around the chamber that had been his whole world. But Sanaa knew it wasn't just about the lighthouse. In the keeper's quarters below, hidden in her father's desk drawer, lay another letter, one she had discovered 3 days ago while searching for spare logbook pages. The prestigious Maritime Safety Corporation in the city had offered him a position, overseeing their new automated lighthouse network. The salary was 5 times what he earned here, but it meant leaving Port Haven, leaving their ancestral home, leaving everything they had ever known. The wind picked up outside, carrying with it the first spatters of rain. The storm that had been threatening all day was finally breaking. Sanaa moved to check the weather glass, another ritual passed down through generations. The mercury had dropped significantly. This would be no ordinary storm. She remembered the last time the mercury had dropped this low, 10 years ago, when they'd lost 3 ships in a single night. That was the night her mother had left, unable to bear the guilt of lives lost on their watch, though the investigation had cleared them of any wrongdoing. As if summoned by her dark thoughts, a massive wave crashed against the rocks below, sending tremors through the entire structure. The ancient lens juddered in its housing, and for a heart-stopping moment, the beam flickered. Zaire sprang into action, his earlier melancholy forgotten. He rushed to stabilize the mechanism, but something was different this time. The familiar hum of the rotation system had taken on a disturbing grinding note. The main bearing, Zaire muttered, his face ashen. It's finally giving out. Through the windows, Sanaa could see the harbor lights in the distance, and beyond them, the running lights of at least a dozen fishing boats racing for shelter ahead of the storm. If the lighthouse failed tonight, those boats would be sailing blind into Port Haven's notorious rocky approach. The thought of more lives lost, more families torn apart like her own, made her stomach clench. Below in the keeper's quarters, Grandfather Kiyoshi felt the lighthouse shudder. His weathered hands paused over the logbook he'd been studying. The same logbook his own father had used during the Great Storm of 1962. Without a word, he reached for the carved wooden box beneath his bed, the one that contained the lighthouse's oldest secrets. Meanwhile, in the lamp room, Zaire fought with the failing mechanism. His tools scattered across the floor as another wave rocked the tower. The grinding sound grew louder, metal screeching against metal. The beam stuttered again, longer this time, plunging the churning waters into darkness for precious seconds.
Sanaa, get the emergency backup system ready,
Zaire ordered, his voice tight with concentration. But they both knew the truth. The backup system was as old as the main one, and the replacement parts they'd ordered were still weeks away, delayed by bureaucracy and budget constraints. Through the rain-streaked windows, Sanaa could see the fishing boats drawing nearer. Their radio crackled to life, voices thick with concern.
Port Haven Lighthouse, do you copy? Your beam appears to be fluctuating. We've got 6 vessels attempting approach. Over.
Before either of them could respond, footsteps echoed on the spiral staircase. Grandfather Kiyoshi appeared, breathing heavily from the climb, clutching a wooden box Sanaa had never seen before. Move aside, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of decades of lighthouse keeping. From the box, Kiyoshi withdrew a collection of tools far older than Zaire's modern equipment, and a leather-bound journal whose pages had turned yellow with age. Your great-grandfather
faced this same problem during the storm of 1962,
he explained, quickly flipping through the journal.
The bearing isn't just failing, it's out of alignment. The vibrations from these new storms are stronger than the old mounting system was designed to handle.
Zaire's eyes widened with recognition. The
secondary support ring. We've been focusing on the wrong thing entirely.
Together, father and daughter watched as Kiyoshi directed them in what needed to be done. His knowledge, passed down through generations of keepers, proved more valuable than any modern manual. They worked quickly, their hands moving in concert, each performing their part in an intricate mechanical dance. But the storm wasn't waiting. A particularly massive wave struck the lighthouse with such force that Sanaa nearly lost her footing. The impact seemed to travel up through the very stones, and suddenly, the beam went dark, completely. In that moment of darkness, Sanaa heard something she'd never forget. The sound of pure terror coming through the radio as the fishing boats lost their only guide through the treacherous waters. She thought of her mother, of that night 10 years ago, of all the lives that hung in the balance. Without thinking, she grabbed the emergency lamp from its case and raced down the stairs.
No, Sanaa.
She heard her father shout behind her, but she didn't stop. The wind nearly knocked her over as she burst out onto the gallery walkway, the old brass lamp clutched in her hands. Rain lashed at her face as she fought her way around the tower's circumference. This lamp wasn't nearly as powerful as the main beam, but if she could at least mark the most dangerous rocks. Above, she could hear her father and grandfather working frantically to restore the main line. Below, the radio continued to crackle with increasingly desperate voices. But Sanaa remained focused on her task, swinging the emergency lamp in the pattern her grandfather had taught her. 3 sweeps left.
Sweeps left. Pause. 2 sweeps right. Pause.
The ancient warning signal that every local sailor would recognize. Minutes stretched like hours as she maintained her vigil. Her arms aching, her clothes soaked through. Then suddenly, gloriously, the main beam blazed to life above her. Its powerful light cut through the darkness, steady and strong, perhaps stronger than it had been in years. When Sanaa finally made her way back up to the lamp room, she found her father holding the Maritime Authorities letter in one hand and the job offer from the city in the other. Without a word, he fed both documents into the small stove that helped keep the lamp room warm. The
The
sea
sea
gives,
gives, and the sea takes.
Grandfather Kiyoshi said softly.
But tonight, it gave us something precious, a reminder of who we are.
His hands still resting on the ancient tools that had saved them. Zaire turned to his daughter, his eyes shining with pride. I forgot something important, he said.
This lighthouse isn't just about the mechanism or the building. It's about the keepers, the knowledge passed down, the dedication to service above all.
He looked at his father, then back at Sanaa, and then added,
3 generations, working as one. That's something no automated system can replace.
Dawn broke over Port Haven, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of pink and gold. The fishing boats had all made it safely to harbor, their crews already spreading the story of how the old lighthouse had saved them twice in one night. Once with an ancient emergency signal they'd learned from their grandfathers, and once with a beam that now shone brighter than ever. As Sanaa began the morning ritual of cleaning the lens, she smiled at the simple truth that had been in front of them all along.
Sometimes, the future wasn't about discarding the past. It was about building upon it, 108 steps at a time.
Which character's perspective resonated most with you? Sanaa's youthful determination, Zaire's internal struggle, or Kiyoshi's traditional wisdom? If you've enjoyed this story this far, like and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming releases. Also, you will find more reflection questions in the comments. Seize this opportunity and share your own life experiences and insights with the world. Let's do this.